let's start
Right.
by asking, who is Jide Ipaye? Let's get to know you better. This video is going to go out to diaspora as well as upcoming
Right.
Nigerians who aspire to be like someone like you. So please, if you could tell us a bit of yourself, the background, where you started
Mhm.
from, and then we'll interject as we
Right.
go along.
Okay. So I would say Jide Ipaye is a work in progress entrepreneur, adventurer, social change maker, a little bit of an artist, if you could call it that. And I'm just basically on this work in progress journey because being a work in progress is actually a beautiful thing. It means that you are never finished. You are constantly trying to be a better version of yourself, and you're trying to grow, learn, soak up things. So I just put myself in that position as a work in progress entrepreneur, adventurer, author in principle, artist, and all of that. My journey has been a very peculiar one. I started wearing my dad's shoes at the age of 10. And, by the age of 11, I had lost both of my parents to a ghastly accident, in Nigeria. And so I ended up living with my grandparents, who basically took me in, the only child, no brother, no sister. And so they were very, very influential in terms of how I grew up. And luckily for me, my grandparents had 6 children, my mom being one of them, who, rest her soul, had other siblings. So there were 2 medical doctors, a computer scientist, an artist, and then my auntie who worked in Shell for several years. And so I grew up being influenced by a lot of these people. And I was actually a very confused child growing up. I studied in Ijaniki. I went to the Federal Government College, Ijaniki. And I remember that before I got into the, secondary school, my granddad would keep asking what I wanted to be. In those days, it was, do you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an architect? It was basically all about going into some sort of professional field, which would guarantee the safety of this young child. And, basically, for posterity's sake and making sure that this guy was brought up the right way, they tried to influence me in that direction. So I grew up seeing Diseases of the Tropics books under the staircase because the 2 medical doctors were there. So I would wander under the staircase and open up these books and see all sorts of diseases and, stuff on pathology, stuff on this. So I grew up seeing that. And at the same time, I remembered my uncle, the computer scientist working in NMPC, and I would remember that I would see these long sheets of paper that had holes at the sides. And these were basically programs that had been written and then had to be printed out on these big mainframe machines. So I saw that growing up. And then I had the uncle, the artist, who would paint in the house. And so I saw all of this and I was so confused. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I kind of like trudged along growing up. I went to Ijaniki. I was put into the sciences because my granddad obviously preferred me being a medical doctor since he had 2 sons that were successful medical doctors. And so by default, medicine seemed like the right choice. But then I struggled with maths in school.
I'm going to take you back a bit. So there you are, an 11-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
losing your parents.
Right.
This must have affected you somewhat psychologically. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, Let's delve into that part of it. How did it make you feel? How did you overcome that upset? How did it motivate you? Bearing in mind that, yes, you had grandparents who were happy to cater for you. But let's look at the psychological part of an 11-year-old losing his parents. It must have been a heavy blow, because they were the only 2 you knew.
About 12 months ago, I had a conversation with my editor. I started writing a book over a year ago. I thought it was important to write my story and, try to, relive a lot of those experiences that I've had. And one of the things that occurred to me suddenly was that when we started conversing, she started asking me questions about that part of my life. And suddenly I realized there were a lot of things I didn't remember. So when we started talking, she said to me that a lot of times when children go through trauma or people go through certain times of trauma in their lives, the brain kind of shuts down, or it goes into a sort of protective mechanism where it actually shuts out a certain element of what you might have experienced. As a child, it was very traumatic. In those days, there was no such thing as a psychologist in the African context of things. So people never really wanted to talk about it. It was too painful, a loss for my grandparents. I mean, this was their dear daughter who was still in her prime. She was just about 40 something. She was about 40. And so she was still very young in their eyes. And so they did a lot to try to buffer me. And I think one of the things that also helped was whilst I was growing up also, I had started building a relationship with my grandparents at an early age. I remember them, we're staying, on the island. But then during the weekdays, they would send me over to my grandparents. And then I was going to a Catholic school because my grandparents and the family has very strong Catholic upbringing. So they decided it was good for me to go to a Catholic school. And so I had already started living with my grandparents during the week, and then weekends I'll go to the island and live with my friends. And so to a certain degree, whilst I had a lot of trauma, it was all like a dream. I couldn't really fathom what was going on at the age of 11. It was very difficult to absorb it, but they kind of found a way to be there. Everybody came together and decided to rear this child. So, my auntie was my mother. She took the role of the mother. The four brothers became my father, plus my grandfather. And then my grandmom, who was an absolute angel. I mean, she had taught in school for 35 years. She taught so many people, the likes of Chris Okeke. So many people went through her school. She taught at St. Matthias. So she was a teacher. And so everybody just rallied around for this child. And I think it really helped to strengthen me. It also created a lot of confusion, having to decide who should I emulate? That was difficult for me, but it was traumatic, no doubt. And being an only child, I think it forced me to become very introspective about things. Yes. I spent a lot of time alone, and I basically had to find some ways to mentally escape, daydream, whatever it was, listen to music, find friends in the neighborhood that I could stay around with, my cousins. They basically just tried to create that buffer for me, and I think they did an amazing job to help me through that crisis without necessarily talking about it.
Yes, that's the African way, isn't it? Right. So there you are, a young man looking at books, medicine, being asked what it is that you wanted to do, what you wanted to become. Let's take it from there. How did that move forward into creating Keexs?
Keexs at that point in time was never even in the field. It was never in the horizon, as it were. I think I was still going through the motions of even trying to find out who I was or what I wanted to do. I was still a very young, undecisive child at the age of 11. And I think I kind of tried to wander through life in terms of trying to figure out what it was I really wanted to do. And up until 2015, to be very candid, when CNN African Voices did an interview on me, I really didn't know why I got to where I had gotten to up until that time. It was more like that was the first time in my life I actually connected the dots. But I'll bring it back home. So at this point in time, I'm in secondary school. Like every other young kid, I had actually gone to a school called Federal Government College in Joanny. And I was, at that time I was 11. And then my parents were coming to pick me up, and then there was a gas day accident, and, that led to them being taken away by God, and God rest their soul. And I think that I had spent 3 terms in Idwani, and obviously everybody thought, look, this child can't go back to those states. It's too far away. There's no way we can monitor him. And so they found a way to bring me to Federal Government College Janiki, which was in Lagos. And so here I was being pulled out from an environment that I was already comfortable with. I mean, I had made friends in Idwani, but then I was still going through the whole trauma. And then I was literally lifted and dropped in Ijaniki, which was the 4th term in Form 1. There were 4 terms in my own Form 1. And so I was a complete stranger in Ijaniki. I didn't know anybody. I was this very confident child when I was in Idwani, assertive, tall, stood out, made friends. And then suddenly I was dumped into a new environment where all eyes were on me. So I turned into this very introverted, shy child who did not have was not assertive. I was just there, just trying to walk around quietly and not being noticed without being noticed, if that made any sense. Because a new kid on the block, stories had gone around, for some that knew. And so it was very hard for me to absorb this whole new environment and adjust to it. But again, my grandparents, my auntie especially, she played the mother role. She would come on visiting days. She would, everybody just rallied around for me. And, I kind of like went through the motions in Ijaniki. And then it was now JAM. Again.
Before we talk of JAM,
yes.
Talk us through, you're in your 4th term of Form 1. Surely you eventually got to make friends. Surely you decided to create a path. Talk us through that. Let's know how you came out of your shell, and what impact the Ijaniki had on you before JAM.
So Ijaniki was, I think when I went to Idwani, I had this sense of adventure. This was the first time in my life that I ever, as a child, left Lagos State. This was the first time I'd ever been away from my parents, my grandparents, and everybody else. And suddenly I was in Idwani, bush everywhere. They had the dam. They had the dam where we used to go and fetch water.
Yes.
They had hills all over the place. They had ants like Ikamudu.
Yes,
and they had Esusuiba, which were those flies that they would put, bowls of water out there.
Flies.
And then they would, they're termites actually, and they would drop into the bowl of water, and the kids would then basically sift them out, and then literally fry the thing and eat it, So here I was, young boy, no idea of anything, never been out there on my own. And so Ijaniki offered me that opportunity again. But it took me a while. It probably took me about a year of staying in school to make new friends. And I think that one of the first friends I made was Debo Suarez. Debo had just come in from Federal Government College in Lorry. Okay. And so we were both strangers. And so we were one of the first people to make friends because we both didn't know anyone and we had that in common. But as the years evolved, I remember that our principal, God rest her soul, Mrs. Abisogunalo, she was a very, very strong, powerful woman. I remember then she would be like, Bolaji Fini, I know your father. Go home and do that in your father's house. And this was in assembly where she knew every child. And so I was handed over to Mrs. Abisogunalo and Mr. Aino and a few other people. So I had a guardian, Mrs. Cole then, Miss Cole, and then the principal also had an eye on me. And I remember that, I got bullied a few times. I also became a senior. I bullied a few.
Yes, it was a way of life.
Jacked a few lockers, broke some bounds, went through Era Village to go to Okoko. Just the whole adventure of it, you know what I mean? It wasn't anything,
sinister.
Dubious. Yes. Sinister. It was just having a sense of adventure, and that I got from Ijaniki as well. And then I got to make a lot of friends, kids from similar backgrounds, kids from diverse backgrounds, from people, a kid coming from Saudi Arabia that was brought into Nigeria, kids brought from UK, brought into Nigeria, kids brought from everywhere, from the half caste to the whites, to the quarter caste, to the Russians, to the all sorts. And so here I was in the mix of a lot of things going on. And again, it felt like home.